Hey guys, in this episode of Ask Bloop, we're going to talk about what to expect from 3D animation schools and how I come up with my ideas for my short films.
Jeremy asks, "Hey Moore, what are some things to look for in a university's 3D animation program? Lastly, any tips on paying for college? Many of the schools that offer 3D animation seem to be quite expensive."
Hey Jeremy, I don't have any tips about paying for college except for maybe just not going to college and trying a place like Animation Mentor or Full Sail University, which is a lot cheaper and gives you a very, very specific education with learning technical skills such as animations, modeling, texturing, whatever you want to do in 3D. That might be a cheaper option for you. Regarding to what to expect from going to a 3D school is a lot of time is going to be wasted on stuff that is not 3D and 3D animation. If you're going to a 4-year bachelor's degree in animation, you're going to be learning a bunch of stuff that you don't really need, including liberal arts, which would take almost half of your time. And also a lot of courses that you might not be interested in, like, I don't know, Photoshop. Well, if you want to be an animator and just an animator, learning Photoshop might not be relevant at all. It's a good thing to know, but I'm just saying if you want to really, really only learn the stuff that you're interested in, a 4-year degree is probably not best. Another thing you could expect from any 3D animation program is to have a short film at the end. This is like your final project, your thesis film, people call it. I don't know why they call it thesis. You're not exploring any new like research or anything. You're just making a film, but they call it a thesis film. And this is probably the most valuable thing you're going to get out of an animation program. And not only because you're going to get great shots for your reel and meet people, be able to present your work to people in a form of a finished film, which is great. It also teaches you a little bit about the industry and about the pipeline and workflow of making an animated short film, which is something that's great to know, especially if you're going to be making more of those in the future, or if you're going to be hired by any studio. It's good to know what to expect and how to work, because the workflow of making a film is very, very complicated and complex. And by going through all of those stages yourself, because you're probably going to be doing most of the stuff for your film, you're not going to be a part of like a huge team in most cases. Sometimes students collaborate together, and some of them animate, some of them model, but I think in most cases the student does 90 or 80% of the work on the film on his own. And just knowing what it takes to make each step of the filmmaking is so crucial and so important, because then later when you go to any kind of studio, you know what the lighting department does, even if you're not a lighter or a rigger. So you kind of have an understanding of what's going on around you and how long everything takes. And I think that's pretty important.
Adam asks, "How do you think of an idea for a new animation? Do you brainstorm a lot, or does it just kind of pop into your head?"
Hey Adam, coming up with ideas is really hard. I mean, there are a lot of good ideas. There are a lot of ideas that come up to your head, but then when you kind of try to flush them out into a story, you realize they're not really as good as you thought. It's actually really hard to build an entire story for say a short film, which is what I do. So I kind of came up with a method that works for me. I call it the restriction method. I wrote an article about it. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Basically what it is you decide your restrictions before you come up with a story, and then you build your story around those restrictions. So for Lift Up, this is literally how I came with the story for Lift Up. I knew that I'm not good with modeling. I'm an animator. I don't like to model. So I decided that my characters are going to be a cube and a ball. So the decision to make them a cube and a ball actually came from my restriction, which is not being able to model. I also knew that I'm not going to start making any crazy renders, because I'm not so much into rendering. I like it a little bit, but I didn't want to start. And my computer also is not really able to produce insane renders. I wasn't going to send it to some kind of render farm that's super expensive. So because I was doing everything myself, I had to account for that. So that's how the whole 2D visual style came from, because of my restrictions, which was time, ability, and my hardware that wasn't good enough. Then when I knew that I have a ball and a cube, I had to start thinking, okay, well, so what's the difference between a ball and a cube? What's the advantages of being a cube versus being a ball? What's the strength and weaknesses of each? So I know that a ball can roll really fast, and a cube is, if a cube tried to walk, it would be a lot harder for her. I say her because my character in that film is a girl. So that's already a conflict. So I had the idea of two, objects, a cube and a ball, who are trying to just go along some kind of path on the road. And it's really easy for one of them, the ball, and it's a lot harder for the other one. That's why at the beginning of the film, you see she's struggling with this journey. So that was my first, the setup for the film. And then I thought, all right, that's the setup, that's the beginning. So what's the twist? What's the conflict? What's the thing that's going to happen that might shake things up a little bit? I tried thinking of the place where a cube would have the advantage over a ball. So on a flat surface, a ball would roll around much faster. But what kind of surface or location would be harder for a ball than for a cube? And then I thought of a slope, because on a slope, the ball would just roll back. And the cube, because she has flat surfaces, would be able to just climb on the slope. So that's why I had the ball tease the cube at first, so that when we get to that slope, it would be like, now the cube can go up and the ball is left behind. And that could have been it, but then there would be no kind of resolve for the characters. The cube would just leave the ball behind and move forward, and the cube won. And it might be a satisfying moment to see how the cube managed to win that race after all of that, but that's not emotional, that's not touching, there's no message behind it, except for each to each his own. That's when I added the ball family that were staying at the top of the mountain, so that cube can see them and realize that ball was just trying to get to his family. And then we see the cube going all the way back and supporting that ball all the way to the top. And that's kind of the moment when there's a shift. She decides to rise above herself and help that ball, that creature, despite the fact that he made fun of her or bugged her at the beginning. So that's that whole story, which is a very touching story about friendships or journeys or whatever you want, all came up from me not knowing how to model very well. So that's why I really believe in the restriction method, because if you know what you're able to do, if you set yourself a limit of, I'm going to use one location, 2 characters, 2 minutes long, you got to decide that beforehand. Then you kind of have to fit a story into those restrictions. And it's much easier to start with that point than starting with a blank canvas. That's what I think. If someone tells you, think of a story, what do you're like, I don't know, I have no idea. But if someone told you, think of a story that involves 2 people, it happens in the kitchen. It has to be in the kitchen, and one of the people is holding a knife. Then when you have that kind of setup, all right, I can kind of find a story there. So I think if you set yourself up with those kind of rules of the project that you're going into, it'll be a lot easier for you to come up with this story. All right, guys, thanks for watching Ask Bloop. To submit your questions, just go to Twitter, use the hashtag AskBloop, and send any questions you want. Don't forget to subscribe and go to bloopanimation.com.